everybody, this is Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso, and in this training video, we are going to be continuing talking about the Field Driver bundle, and specifically, we are going to be talking about the stop motion field. It is a modifier layer that we made, and it might be my most favorite part of this entire collection. I just find myself using it in so many different ways, and it adds such a unique addition to kind of the concept of MoGraph and fields. So, in this scene, I've got a pretty simple setup. It is one of the new emitters in Cinema, shooting out a bunch of particles. So to begin with, I think I'd like to get this randomly generating a bunch of colors. So having a little fun, we'll add in a new field driver and hold down Alt so I can add a random. And what do we want to drive? Well, not the color here, because that'd be the object's color. I want to drive this color. So I drag it onto the tag, and now you see it's labeled C, which is the first letter in that parameter. And let's control the colors, and we can do it via a gradient, or we can do it via this noise. I'll do it via the field of the noise. And in this case, I want it to be based on the gradient, and we'll give it a custom gradient. And that gradient will be, let's go neon again. I like the look of the neon. Grab this one. Yeah, we got these nice neon colors traveling through. Now, as always, I'm going to grab my noise, add a little extra contrast so we can just get that full range through there. Not too far. We don't want to go beyond the bounds of it. And I might speed that up a little bit just so the colors are changing a little bit quicker. Just get that going so I can get that hint of green sneaking in there every once in a while. Excellent. Okay, so now we got these random colors traveling. Next up, I think I'd like to get a little bit of rotation going on here. But I'm going to do it a little bit differently than before. I think instead of just driving the rotation directly, I'm going to make a null, and I want this null to randomly move around. I'm going to do this to avoid like gimbal lock, if you're familiar with that. So I'm going to add onto this null a new field driver. And again, I want to add in some rocket noise for that. So I hold down Alt as I create it. And now you can see I've got this noise. What do I want to control? I would like to control the position. So now you can see it's moving around. Let's go, and it doesn't need to go too far. I'll say 55, copy down, mirror to the other side, and grab our noise, speed it up a bit, and give it some bias. So now you can see that we are fairly extremely moving in all these different orientations all around it. So now that that's moving around, why don't we say that the emitter should target that null? Let's even name it the target. So right-clicking on our basic emitter, I'll make an animation tag, say target, and kind of after all of our stuff is running, I'll say aim at that target. So now you can see that this is going to be randomly, essentially rotating around, but it's avoiding gimbal lock. So with that now randomly moving, I super dig the way that that's moving, but I want to kind of make it pop into different positions. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to this null, which is kind of zipping around doing its thing, and I'm going to speed it up. Let's say that that's going to travel way faster. So now, all this is moving quicker. We can go really quick. Let's crank this up, and now you see it's like whipping all over the place. So kind of cool looking, but let's go into our tag, and right now you see it's just whipping all over. I'm going to say I don't want that moving constantly. And so we're going to use the rocket stop motion modifier layer. So creating that, and let's say it's going, it's affecting position, and this isn't affecting colors. So we can just say affect only position. So now you can see it's only updating every, and let's scroll down, every third frame. I'm going to slow that down. Let's say every 20th frame. So now you see it's going to stay in a particular direction for 20 frames. We can go even longer. Let's say for a full second, it's going to stay in one particular spot. So it just snaps to each of them. So that's pretty cool. The only little transition we see is the subframes that are coming out from the emitter. So I really love being able to snap these, but it's the combination of using stop motion on top of some of the other modifier layers. So one of those modifier layers is going to be delay. If I create a delay, and by default it's set to smooth, you see our stop motion is picking a new orientation, and smooth is transitioning between those states. So you see, we're essentially traveling in these nice linear rotations to get to our new position. Our null is traveling smoothly from spot to spot to spot. It's a way of generating random straight lines, which is very powerful. Now we could drop this lower, so now it's going to transition, but it's going to transition quicker. You see, it's just a little bit of time between there. So jump, jump, jump. So that's pretty cool. But we can also do something like spring, where we'll make it springy on top of that. So it jumps, and you can see because my null is wiggling, the target is kind of wiggling along with it. So I can actually make that relatively strong so we get some nice wiggle going. So I can hang out in one particular spot and then move to a new one. So I always really love this sort of orderly chaos. So I super dig the way that's looking. think I'd like to add a little bit more chaos on top of that. So maybe make it a little less springy so it settles down. But now let's add in some additional rotation. So after all this lovely delay and everything, let's just make a new tab. And we're still controlling, actually, we're controlling position of this object. So I'm going to say I want to do more position wiggling. So I'll say 11, copy it down, mirror it over. And how do I want to drive this? I want to drive it with another random noise. So with the secondary random noise, we will make this one, and we'll just call this one jitter. And that one I'm going to have extra contrast and be traveling like really fast. So now this one's like always jiggling around. So you see, we will get to these static angles, but then once it gets to that static angle, it's kind of got this little extra wiggle going on. And you can see that the way those are traveling here, where they kind of find a position and then wiggle on top of it. So I really love layering up multiple noises on top of it in order to get this very specific type of control on it. And I just love this movement. Like, that's so cool. So yeah, that's kind of one example, a relatively straightforward one, but I just find myself using this over and over again so I can reach these kind of static states on it, on all sorts of different objects. So for instance, just jumping to a new scene, I can create a simple object. Let's do a torus this time, because why not? Make it a little bit bigger. There, big old fat donut here. So let's control the color of that via another random. So I'll say, hold down Alt, create a field driver, and I'll say I want to control the color. So controlling that color, we will make it, again, field-based, click on random, give it a random gradient, and load in something, maybe something different. Let's grab sunset. There we go. I like that one. So as usual, let's crank up that contrast just a little bit, get the full range of noise, which also means the full range of our colors. You see those are randomly transitioning, kind of traveling nicely all over the place. Now, in theory, actually, you know what? I know we just fed in that color, but I'm going to make it an even more extreme color. Let's just grab a full color gradient. So that's fine. Those are all layered up on top of each other. And let's make this a little bit more manic. So I'm going to go faster. I don't want to go too fast. So you can see those, they're changing relatively quickly. So now what I want to do is stabilize those. I don't want it changing quite so quick. So now I can jump inside and create another stop motion. Make sure that's affecting color, depending on these fields, like all these fields, you know, even the cinema ones, they don't necessarily have certain things on by default. So if I turn on stop motion, right now it's updating every third frame. I'm going to say update every 30 frames. So now every 30 frames, and let's increase our timeline here. Every 30 frames is going to decide to update. Now, that's a color that's already kind of happening underneath it. So if I turn this off, that color is already happening there, but it only updates on that frame. So it suddenly pops in and is statically that color. Now, again, even now we're generating these nice random pops of different color, but if we still want that transition, I can set another delay and make sure delay is affecting color. None of these need to be affecting the value. That doesn't even need to calculate. So now if we make a smooth, I can lower that down, and now we'll get a smooth transition from each color. So that blue, yellow went to red, went to blue, went to purple, and we get that little transition. With 0%, it just pops. But with some smoothing, we'll get a nice linear transition between them. So super dig that. And then we've got, again, spring. We can grab spring, and now it's going, you have to go pretty far on this one, but as it pops from color, it'll actually overshoot the color and then wiggle into position. It's subtle, so yeah, you got to go a little overboard on that one, but yeah, that works really, really nicely. So once again, love combining those things. And keep in mind, we can do a big stop motion, and then we can do a second stop motion that's a little bit quicker. So now that we got that flashing jiggle, I can say, okay, now that's happening, but now only update every 5th frame. And now you'll see that we get the kind of pops on top of it. So we got a stop motion on top of a stop motion, which is being modified by a delay. So again, super fun to layer these up. Let's move into another scene file here. So again, there's just 1,000,001 uses for using the stop motion. So in this one, I've got a bunch of these camera models from the asset browser, and I got a very simple plane effector. And this plane effector is going to do two things. It's going to spin the cameras around to face us, and the screens have a custom color. The custom color is coming from the linear field, and you see it's going to do a solid, like yellow, orange, pink, purple, blue, all coming at us. So just linear. And I've got Field Driver that's just making this linear field travel. So you're all caught up on what the scene is doing. So I hit play, and now you see the phones will rotate, and we got these kind of solid colors. Now, unfortunately, you can see a couple problems. You can see that it's spinning them around, but we're missing the purple and the blue because they're still facing the wrong direction. So inside of this linear, which is controlling the rotation and the color, I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, let's create a weight, a rocket weight. So that's also included in the plugin. I'm going to say, I want this to not to affect the value, but only affect the color. And I'm going to say, I want those to wait, let's say like a full 30 frames. I'm saying that color should delay, even though it's coming from the same effector, it should delay for a long time. And now you can see we actually do see the purple coming in. So excellent. That is what I wanted to have happen. And now that that is delayed, why don't we add some smoothing on there? Because this linear field is very linear. Now, obviously, we could smooth them out here, but as a demo, let's add in a delay and set that to smooth and make sure it's affecting the color as well. So now you can see we get the smoother gradient as those are slowly transitioning. I could even increase that a little bit more and get an even smoother gradient between there. So that looks pretty cool. But now let's go and add our stop motion. So if I add in the stop motion, you're going to see that there is going to be a delay on the value and I can say on the color. Although let's wait on the color. So you see I do it based on the value. So now these phones are only rotating every once in a while. But you know what? I don't actually want to affect the value. I want to only affect the color. But right now, it's only updating every third frame, which isn't too extreme, and I'm not really seeing the effect. So let's push that way further and say 15 frames. So now stop motion saying only update your color every 15 frames. And you see pop, 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 pop. So very blatantly we're seeing it. But I'm actually not interested in this update every. We've got additional settings here. We can do variation. So I could say, well, have variations of up to 15. So now it might take 15 to update, but also might only take one. So you're going to see it's very random. So it's a way of getting a, kind of individualized stop motion. All of them will update together. Like this variation makes all of them update together, but all updating offset by some value. But then we've also got an offset setting. So we can say, okay, these updates happen, but I want them to happen sooner or I want them to happen later. But then what I want to play with here isn't this variation. It is this indexed checkbox. Right now, everything is just updating on a uniform time. But if I turn on indexed and we start giving this a value, every index is going to start updating based on a little bit of variation. So you see each one updates randomly, but only as offset by its update every. But we could start increasing that amount. So if I say like 10, you see that there's going to be a lot more variation. Let's go with a full 15 to match our update every. And now you can see that we've got almost total variation in the way that those are updating. So without ever adding in any sort of random, we have now got the ability to transition this color in this very randomized way. Again, adding so much power just by modifying very simple things. So now that those colors are coming in, maybe we want a slightly smoother transition. So we could add another delay on top of it. Let's make sure that we're affecting not the value, but the color. And now you can see it's smoothing those back out again. So let's just find the right in between here. Let's just smooth them a little. Oh, there we go. So we get this nice transition. So just that little bit of offset there. And we didn't have to fiddle around with like overlaying randoms and setting the overlays, and color overlays are never super happy with each other. These are all just layering up and we have very precise control over everything. So yeah, super duper love the ability to add stop motion in and affect things like color in this instance. Now, let's jump to one final example scene. And there's a million different things. I use this in like almost every single thing I've played around with using our field driver setup. But let's jump into this scene file. And I've actually got an entire animation that I will play right here. And this took quite a while to render, but it was really fun to put together. So let's sort of step through and look at how I put that animation together. So in this case, we got a bunch of different layers. I've got this rock. It's from the asset browser. And then I cloned a bunch of the matrix object all over the surface. And then everywhere that one of those matrix points was, I said, okay, let's clone a bunch of these spheres all over the place. And the reason I cloned spheres on top of those was so that I could then combine them with a connect, so they all became one piece of geometry, and I could clone onto that piece of geometry those nice little arcs there. So then I have this cloner, and that's going to be cloning a whole bunch of these sort of crystal shapes on there. In order to show those, I have to show you that there's going to be this vertex map. Actually, let me turn off the cloner for a moment. There's a vertex map doing the same type of growth that you saw in the weight video. So if I hit play, you're going to see I have a vertex map that is slowly growing with a lot of noise over the surface. So there's random growth on there. Now that random growth is doing several things. That random growth, for one, and right now I haven't used any field driver stuff. I can click on this tag and it's actually colorizing that vertex map. So as it grows, it's going from this dark green to this very vibrant green. And inside of fields, actually, we are using a field, and we're going to talk about this in the next video, but it's Rocket Hue. Actually, this is the old version before we renamed it. So it's actually Rocket HSB. So I'm really excited to talk about that one. But a little teaser, we can actually shift colors around automatically and even more. So with that in mind, we can now go back, and we are going to be driving this cloner, and we're driving the cloner with a scale. So we got these tiny, tiny little crystals, and the scale is going to scale them huge. I mean, I think I'm scaling to, they're getting to be like 250 times their current size. So that is being driven by a bunch of different fields. So let's go through here. You see that there's a vertex map. So mainly them being close to the vertex map growing is going to make the crystals grow. And then there's going to be some random clustering. So that is just making some bigger ones, some smaller ones with a regular cinema noise. And then I am making them have a fall off based on where the matrices are, just to make it so the center cluster is bigger than the outer cluster. Lots of stuff going on there. And then I am using a Rocket Noise just to add some pure random scale variation. So let me show you what that looks like. Hitting play. We're now going to have a series of crystals grow on each of those positions. And you see that there's very radial, and that's thanks to me cloning onto that kind of rounded geometry. So the whole point of that was getting these nice clusters of crystals. And I do like the way this looks. It's growing on there. So, no complaints with that. But it's definitely missing something. So let's hide this camera just so it's not in our way. So definitely missing something. So I'm thinking inside this scale, and the only thing that's happening here is we are scaling up in a absolute but non-uniform way. So everything's growing up to some random sizes, pretty close to each other. So inside of the field, with all of that stuff happening, let's create a new stop motion, and it is affecting this value. So you can see that we kind of get the stop motion traveling, but I'm going to slow these way down. Let's say like I'm not even sure what value it was. So I'm going to say 25. And again, let's turn on the indexed, and I'm going to say also every 25. So actually, no, I think I had a lot of variation on there. So I'm going to turn these on. So now you're going to see that we get these clusters of them growing where they update every once in a while. I think we want it more often. So I can say every 15, and it will do a little bit of an offset. So every 10 frames, you get doodle, 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 all of those growing on top of each other. So already you see all this extra motion happening. So now that stop motion is doing that for us, why don't we create a delay, and we could put maybe a little bit of smoothing on there. So they are popping individually into position, but they kind of jump, 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 getting a little bit bigger. And then maybe just a little extra something on top of that. I'll make another delay, and this one I'll add some springiness to it. We might need a relatively high value. Let's see what happens. So yeah, it grows and adds a bigger, bigger, bigger. It's a little strong, so let's pull back on that. And yeah, I just want a hint of it. Do you see how they just slightly overshoot where they were? So just by adding in a stop motion and a couple of delays, look at how much more life there is in these crystals just popping into position. So very, very pleased with that. And then on top of that, we've got a second effector, and this one's just controlling color. So if I turn that on, you can see that the crystals are also taking on some vertex color, just from the vertex color map, the green one that you saw. And if we wanted to, we could turn on this color and get some extra color variation thanks to this random rocket noise. Assigning these colors, so layering that up on top. Now we could also make these colors transition smoother, but I didn't have to. But let's take one more look at the final render of this. And that was the entire process, essentially putting this together, setting up materials, driving everything. There's even more layers where you see like those little rocks moving right at the base. But yeah, pretty happy with the way that one came out. And hopefully this inspires you for some of the different things you can do with the stop motion. Now, it actually wasn't even layered up, but just one last final element was this camera. So this camera is using stuff talked about in the field driver training video. And that is, let me disable these. You can see I've got this nice smooth camera movement that I keyframed. So there's just some keyframed camera animation, kind of traveling along the crystals. And then I said, well, I want to add in some random positions. So this is now piggybacking on the back of it. So double clicking, holding down shift, that will automatically turn on. You can now see I've got a little positional variation, and then holding down shift, I'll double click and add some rotation. So now you see that my rotation and position are wiggling on top of the camera, just giving it a little bit more life, and all these crystals growing using just a little bit of the stop motion on top of everything. So yeah, very, very pleased with the way that came together. So I think that is going to wrap up this one. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.